Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News Break. It's Friday, September 23rd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Han Da-eun. We begin in New York, where South Korea's foreign minister addressed North Korea's nuclear and human rights issues in a much stronger tone than usual to the United Nations. This comes amid the Kim Jong-un regime's perpetual acts of belligerence. Our Kwon So-ah with more on Minister Yoon's forceful remarks.
North Korea is now in the final stage of nuclear weaponization, was the blunt warning issued by South Korea's top diplomat Byungse. In his keynote speech to the UN General Assembly Thursday, Minister Yoon said the 2 nuclear and 22 missile tests this year alone show the regime's nuclear program has neared a tipping point.
The latest nuclear test was the strongest ever. The test interval was also significantly reduced from average 3 years to 8 months. Given North Korea's unpredictability and its penchant for provocations, its next nuclear provocations may come even sooner than we expect.
With North Korea ignoring its international obligations, Minister Yoon said a fundamental question, which many members are already raising, is whether North Korea actually deserves to be a member of the United Nations. Seoul's top diplomat also slammed the regime for wasting money on its weapons development while disregarding the needs of its own people, as it conducted its 5th nuclear test while the country was suffering some of the worst flooding in decades. Prior to his speech, Minister Yoon told reporters that it's time for the UN Security Council to take its discussions on North Korea's human rights violations a step further and take, quote, meaningful action. According to a South Korean government official, the UN Security Council is mulling whether to include Pyongyang's human rights abuses on a new sanctions resolution currently under discussion following the North's recent nuclear test. While it's the UN Human Rights Council that usually deals with human rights issues, the UN Security Council is the only organ of the United Nations that has the authority to issue binding resolutions to members. That's why the Security Council's approach to human rights issues has been under the microscope for a long time. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and China also got busy to tackle North Korea's nuclear issue. The two sides have agreed on the need for strong countermeasures against North Korea in light of the regime's latest provocation. After holding talks in Beijing on Thursday, Kim Hong-yoon, Seoul's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, and his Chinese counterpart Wu Da-wei reportedly noted the seriousness of the situation and discussed possible sanctions for the North Korean regime. But we don't know yet to what extent the level of sanctions was discussed. Beijing is generally opposed to excessive sanctions based on concerns it could lead to North Korea's collapse. In contrast, Seoul and Washington favor strong punitive measures. While global efforts continue to tame North Korea's military ambitions, Pyongyang has made what appears to be an indirect appeal to South Korea for flood relief following the severe flooding in the north that killed or left hundreds missing earlier this month. In a report that appeared Friday, the North Korean website 내나라 carried a story on the regime founder Kim Il-sung's decision to send aid to South Korea after a deadly typhoon hit the country in 1959. The death toll in the south reached 850, and the north sent products such as rice, shoes, and cement. Analysts read this as an indirect call to the South for flood relief. South Korea has maintained that it will not help North Korea following its 5th nuclear test early this month. Seoul's Unification Ministry spokesman Chung Jun-hee, in response, said if Seoul were to provide humanitarian aid to the North, only its leader Kim Jong-un would get the credit. We now go over to the nation's politics, where the delayed parliamentary Q&A session has not begun yet. We connect live to our Shin Se-min for details. Se-min, what's with the delay, and what are we looking at from today's session?
Carolyn, it's the last day of Parliament's 4-day interrelation session, and it's already getting off to a rocky start. As you said, the session kicked off a little over a while ago, but the Assembly is only half full. The majority of ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers are at the party's general meeting instead. Assembly Speaker Chung Se-gyun insisted that Q&A session begin without the ruling party members, saying the session could not be delayed any longer. Initially, the Q&A session was set to begin at 10 a.m. this morning. Now, earlier this morning during the plenary session, the rival political parties had clashed over a motion to appoint Kim Jae-soo to the position of Agriculture Minister. The opposition parties say Kim is unfit because of alleged ethical lapses that include allegations of questionable real estate transactions when he was the president of the state-run Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation. But the parliamentary Q&A is back on track at the moment, and the main topics are education and social issues. So I'll keep an eye on it and bring you the latest in our later newscast.
Thank you, Semin, for that. Keep us posted. Korea's exports to China have plunged for 14 straight months now. The Korea International Trade Association says the country's outbound shipments to China dropped around 5% in August from a year earlier. Korea's exports to its largest trading partner have been on a downward slide since July 2015, when the figure went down by 6.5% on year. The pace of decline, however, is showing signs of improvement. The drop in exports to China in August represents the smallest margin of decrease this year. In January, exports to China plunged more than 20%. And that is ARIRANG News Break for today. Thank you for watching.